Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I'm Aaron Dillon and welcome to the Politics Show. Today we're joined by MEP Andrew England Kerr. Andrew, welcome back to the show. Obviously an unprecedented era in politics.
Incredible.
And it's been quite a rocky road for yourself as well. You
Up
were
and down.
elected to the Brexit Party in European Parliament, but now standing as an independent.
Correct.
A lot of information has been circulating about that. Why did you leave the Brexit Party?
Well, they had issues. Basically, when I was elected, I was contacted by a former Labour Defence Minister and a sitting Labour MP who wanted me to raise some issues about British MOD procurement that he wasn't happy with. And he knew that having had a company that associated with that area, I had experience and knowledge that he thought I could help and therefore help other companies. And unfortunately, some information that was confidential to myself was taken from me one way or another, and the Brexit Party got the wrong end of the stick over it, and we've now parted company. But to me, there were some important issues outstanding, especially on safety for police body armour and military body armour, and it was important. You know, I'd been asked to raise issues by a well-respected Labour MP on serious issues, and I was duty-bound morally and legally to continue with them. But I don't regret it whatsoever, and I'm freer now actually to pursue those views and interests.
You were obviously one of the many success stories for the Brexit Party in the European elections earlier this year. Having now left the party, is there any bad blood there?
No, I mean, we probably won't be going out for a drink with Nigel Farage and Richard Tice, but I still get on very well with some of the other Brexit MEPs, and actual fact, one of them phoned me up and made me promise not to resign as an MEP. You know, so we do get on very well, and I hope we will continue to get on well. And
now standing as an independent, have your priorities changed in any way?
No, not in that sense. I'm still fighting to look after West Midlands interests, which I'm passionate, because I was the only one of the Brexit MEPs to stand in the West that actually lived in the West Midlands. So I'm proud to be a Brummie, and I think I can bring my business interests and my social interests to try and look after them. Some people might not agree with them. I hope that most will, hopefully. But I'm still very passionately committed to the West Midlands.
And the upcoming general election on December the 12th, widely being labelled as the Brexit election, as you know. Do you believe that the UK will leave the European Union following that election?
I think there's a good chance we're going to stay now, whether we like it or not. I was passionate about leaving the EU, but passionately, just as passionate, that it had to be on the right terms. Because if it wasn't on the right terms, it could be detrimental both politically and constitutionally and economically to the country. And therefore, I wanted to leave but only on the right terms. If it wasn't on the right terms, I'd rather we stay in the EU and fight within the EU to protect British interests. I've not changed one iota on that. And the Theresa May's deal, I think, was so roundly condemned as so bad. Well, this current one is so close to it. I haven't changed my view, quite honestly, that we should stay in the EU.
And if there was a referendum with the current deal on the paper, would you vote Remain?
I'd vote Remain.
Yeah. Is your belief still that we should leave without the deal, a hard Brexit, despite some of the economic fears that could...
I think if I had my magic wand, I'd vote to leave without a deal, given the current sin, and that because I think it would be economically beneficial for our country. That sort of view is supported even by the chief economist for the Bundesbank, saying that Britain has it within its spirit to always do better. But they were also warning what would be dangerous or bad for Britain would be to leave on terms that would confine us or constrain us economically. And the current deal, the Boris deal, would constrain us without a shadow of doubt. And therefore I think that's bad for Britain, and therefore I don't think he'll negotiate anything better after the 3-year period or longer, because it's just natural from the politics. You know, you've got to bear in mind, especially that the EU is fighting for its survival. They don't want Britain to do better outside the EU. We've got a very pro-Remain civil service who are negotiating, and now we've got a Conservative government proposing this deal. I don't think we have any chance of getting a clean break. I know Nigel Farage wants that, but the economic and political reality, it's not going to happen. So in business, you get dealt a cards at times, and you've got to make the most of it. You can't live in a fantasy world. If you want to protect the British livelihoods and British jobs and interests, we've got to be realistic. And I think, therefore, we'll end up probably staying in, and we need, therefore, to work within the EU to try and convince them what laws should be applicable, etc., what economic targets we should be setting or grants to go forward in these challenging times. And so we'll have to probably have a change of culture. And I think some of my fellow MEPs are saying that. If we come in, we can't be just criticising and making maybe sometimes inappropriate speeches. We're going to have to get stuck into those committees in a constructive manner, as we've actually shown now on some of the safety standards that I've raised. We've shown the European, there are serious safety problems with protective equipment. They actually commissioned a report that have actually drawn together all worldwide reports that have confirmed my views. And they are now going to look to maybe harmonise the new safety standards in the future to correct those deficiencies. So it just shows you what you can be done. Because bottom line is, I think Grenfell Tower has shown us the horrendous consequences when you have dangerous materials used. And really, they knew these weren't right. We've got to pull together as a country, and if we're part of Europe, to make sure such materials are never used in again. And we bring in the right safety standards to protect people. And Grenfell Tower is a horrendous incident. And as actually one leading Birmingham architect said to me, no one has died in the UK where there have been sprinklers fitted. And given that the fire brigade don't have ladders that can go beyond the 7th floor, it's horrendous. You know, for safety standards and common sense, morality, we should have sprinkler systems fitted within tower blocks as a matter of urgency. And so there's a lot to be done.
And just staying on the issue of Brexit, particularly the economy, you no doubt believe the UK can survive in the longer term. Do you believe that a shorter term economic hit would be worth taking, particularly amid the austerity issues we've seen across the country? Vulnerable residents in real despair, some of them.
I wouldn't take the economic hit if it was the Boris deal, because I don't think it's worth it in the short run or long run. It'd be highly detrimental even in the long run. Therefore, I wouldn't want to see us take that deal. We've got enough problems in this country without putting us through unnecessary economic and political strife. And I'm really concerned that if we, from a political side and the divergence of the country, we'll have a split country for maybe 10 or 15 years ahead, because people will be complaining that they didn't feel the Brexit issue was dealt with. If anything, we should have had another referendum. I mean, Nigel Farage said to me, even in, I think it was in the September Telford rally, when we were discussing, he'd rather have another referendum than the current deal. Well, my answer is then, well, you should say it openly and publicly. I would say it. If that's what you really believe, then say it. Because coming back to restoring trust in politicians and confidence, it will come down to one thing. Mean what you say what you mean, and do what you say. That's the only way we're going to restore confidence in politicians and working better together. Because I'm quite surprised, you know, that one of the benefits of going to Strasbourg is terrible flights to Strasbourg. So often you have to fly to quite distant places, and then they send a chauffeur-driven car, and often they can take an hour. And so you end up sitting with leaders of the opposition parties, and you spend an hour. And it's quite surprising, you know, with a senior Liberal member, saying, we got on extremely well. And we come to common agreement. It just shows what can be done if people talk and open in a constructive manner.
and obviously you were put forward as one of the Brexit Party's parliamentary candidates prior to leaving the party. Is that your ambition? Would you like to become a member of Parliament here?
I went off the thing. I'm quite glad in a way that I'm no longer going to be standing, because it's a very different position. Unless you're in a ministerial position, you haven't got much chance of doing anything beneficial. And I think, actual fact, if we stay in Europe, I'd rather remain as an MEP and have much more chance of doing something beneficial for not just for the UK but for Europe as well. I've seen a little bit of some of the officials in Europe. They are very efficient at times. And what can be done, if you can convince them well and truly, there's serious issues that need to be addressed. Whereas in the British Parliament, it's almost like tribal warfare. The constructive business approach is not so attainable. And actual fact, I think coalition governments in the UK might be far more beneficial with proportional representation. It stops a single party abusing that position. I think the best example of that was the Iraq War. Maybe if we'd had a coalition government, we might not have been misled and lied to for the reason of going to war, which has had horrendous consequences that we're still facing. You know, not only did a horrendous number of people lose their lives, many lost their limbs, lost their mental stability. We destabilized the Middle East, all because we were lied to. And I really do believe there's more chance the British public will not be lied to and deceived if we had a multifunctional, multi-party government in power. You know, I might be too idealistic thinking, but the consequences of us being lied to and deceived is so great and is being repeated. I mean, I don't think we're going to get you're not going to get a fair analysis of the current Boris Johnson deal. I mean, the Theresa May's deal, we were told it was a surrender by Boris. It was a tender into a vassal state, a slave state. Well, the current one being proposed is very little difference. The EU are saying, well, there's no difference. I wouldn't agree with the EU. I think there is a bit of but not that much that we should suddenly say is gone from a horrendous deal to a good deal. I just don't believe. I think it's more that some people maybe want to stay in number 10.
And on the upcoming general election, many believe that the Brexit Party could somewhat snatch thousands and thousands of votes from the Tories and cost them in that election. Do you expect the Brexit Party to do that, and do you expect them to pick up many seats in the election?
I think they would certainly take a lot of votes. I think we've seen that in some of the by-elections where it split the vote and allowed other parties to win, which they might not have won had they not split the vote. I think we can see that happening again. And there are many now polls predicting, despite them splitting the vote, the Brexit Party won't obtain any seats. I wouldn't disagree with that. There was certainly some of us in the Brexit Party, when I was a member, we did consider whether if Boris Johnson brought back a deal, whether it was a good deal or a bad deal, there'd be no point in standing as an MP. That's the economic, because the reality would be that there will be no proper analysis of a bad deal. People have had enough of it, or they wouldn't go. The country wouldn't be given a proper informed decision, like the Iraq War. You would not be given the true information, the true consequences. So, and that's the reality of it. Hence why pretty shrewd business MEPs made that prediction.
If it was a poor election for the Brexit Party, do you think that would be the end of their job and it would be time to end their campaign and time for Nigel Farage to start a new venture?
I think if he doesn't get any MPs, that will be the demise of it. And then those that remain MEPs in the European Parliament will look to other parties to go to try and represent the British interests and work in a more constructive manner. Without a shadow of doubt, I think that will have to be the case. Some might consider the Brexit Party a bit toxic at the times, whereas certainly I'm happy to. I'll talk with most parties. You know, it's quite the first person a foreign MEP that I chatted with when we were in a queue was a member of the Greek Communist Party. And he told me he was going to be watching us to see how well we did, because if we did well and left Europe, they'd follow. And he mentioned that, well, you won't want to talk to me because I'm a member of the Communist Party. And I said, no, my friend, I bet you your constituents are most concerned with their jobs, law and order, and their community. And he goes, absolutely. I said, well, there's no difference between us. I said, you may find we've got a lot more in common than separates us. So I'm a great believer we should talk and communicate and share common goals and common interests.
Have you made a decision on who you'll be voting for in that pre-Christmas general election?
Well, I can't vote for the Conservatives because they want to push through this deal. Much I like a lot of some of the Labour MPs, I've got a great deal of respect for. I think Corbyn is to an extreme to the left, and I worry that we could endanger our economy like the last. So it's going to be very much probably liberal.
Wow. A lot being said as well as about the timing of the election. Do you think that's going to have a bit of a catastrophic impact on voter turnout?
I don't know. I think the British public are a bit more robust than and letting a bit of bad weather. You know, we haven't got the best of climates anyway at the best of times. So I don't think it should be unduly difficult for us. I'd much have preferred a referendum than a general election, because let's look at it at the moment. You've got an awful lot of Labour supporters are Brexit supporters. And really, I think the Labour Party are going more to Remain. So you've got a split Labour. You've certainly got a lot of split Conservatives. So it's really caused a bit of an undue mess by having a general election rather than another referendum.
And you mentioned the travelling aspect of your MEP role before. What would you say is aside from the travelling, what are the hardest, I guess, elements of the role, whether you're in Parliament or whether here?
Now I've got to arrange for new assistants, etc., because unfortunately one of them was the Brexit Party didn't want me to have my normal assistant, which is very regrettable, and I think something the Parliament might have to look into, because one of the fundamental rules of the European Parliament is MEPs should not be subject to undue influence. And if you take away and stop them having their assistants who are totally independent, that's a bit of an issue. So the main concern for us will be, once it's been resolved whether we're staying or not, will be to find which political grouping within the Parliament you will join. And then getting stuck into the committee works. I'm not unduly worried about that. Once we've got the clarification of whether we're staying or remaining, you know, it's like in business. You get on with it. Get on and do the job.
And it's not only Parliament which is divided, it's, you know, you look across the country and communities are truly divided. What do you believe is the key to repairing those divisions in the years to come?
I think basically, well, we're not going to have a referendum. Or you might end up having if you have another hung Parliament. The best way of resolving it is to get politicians to be shown to be working together and resolving issues for the common good. None of this trying to avoid this tribal warfare with highly emotive and improper language. You know, if I can sit down with other members of the parties in the Europe, we should be able to do it here. I mean, as I say, I've had a lot of respect for a lot of Labour MPs, although they're very different from the things, and I can agree to support their views, like I am with this with the safety aspects and the MOD in the European Parliament, because I respect them and I believe, you know, I've got knowledge, and I think other people should be doing the same. You know, we must put the British interest first and foremost. That's so, and then you'll get the respect. But you have to earn respect. It doesn't come. It's hard to earn, easy to lose. And I think the British public have lost respect for the elected MPs, I'm afraid, to the vast majority. Not surprising. We're seeing a lot of very decent Labour being forced out. We've seen a lot of Conservative MPs, in effect, being forced out. It's not good.
And since that EU referendum in 2016, we've seen alarming levels of hate crime as well. Do you believe in some respects that that vote has sort of, and people feel somewhat validated to air some of their abhorrent views?
No, there's no justifiable reason for those disgraceful comments, or even extreme political views. I mean, we've seen a small minority of the Labour Party being really vicious and assault, vicious verbal and some attacks on Brexit or pro. That's not acceptable, and there's no need for it. And if anything, I would rather see some more laws brought in that where you're accusing people of being racist should be made illegal if it's not without justification, because that would, so we stop that and you make it more like a race crime as well. There should be certain things, because that has been the big issue. And then decent people feel they can't talk out on sometimes more sensitive issues. But Birmingham, we don't have a problem. The race is not a problem, but we've got a great multicultural society. We don't have it. So why? I don't think we should tolerate these extremists, whether it's on race or whatever reason. We shouldn't be tolerated. They should be brought before the courts, and the media shouldn't be seeking to inflame it by giving undue reporting. That's one of the biggest problems, I think. But at the same time, the media has a massive responsibility. There's many felt, I'm afraid, that the BBC did not give a fair representation to the Brexit views before the referendum. There wasn't a balanced debate. So there needs to be a balanced debate in the national media, so people can listen and think, well, at least my views are being discussed, and they're here, but not to put them down, to brand them. I think, unfortunately, there's a liberal view, too liberal view within the BBC at times. Therefore, anyone who's not to their view is considered a bit of an extremist. Say we won't give them air. Well, you don't have to be an extremist not to be a liberal view. And I think that has inflamed a lot of the issue, because the media felt they weren't covering the questions of immigration or the EU. It gave the wrong impression.
And we've discussed some of the more challenging aspects of your role. What would you say is the most satisfying part of being a member of European Parliament?
For me, it was actually being able to convince maybe one of the top EU civil servants. There was an extreme problem on safety stand, and getting their pretty rapid acknowledgement that they will look to them, maybe bring in new harm, when they bring in new laws or harm, they will take this into account. That was shown to be that was good. Mixing with some of the other parties, even the British MEP, although not Brexit, showing that we get on very well. We can chat with them, and very charming, and that showed that was nice. So it's not like the tribal warfare that you seem to have in the House of Commons. We can openly discuss. I think, mind you, in the EU, I'd like to engage a bit more, because even on some of the votes that come, you see, and it's lit up on the wall how everyone's voting. It's almost too much tribal voting there. You think, and I'm happy when I listen to a good speech where they're not in line part. I think, well, that's a good point they raised. I'll clap them. I don't see anything wrong with that. So I'm quite pleased to see that being an independent, I can applaud people in a different party, a different way in the opposite part of the Parliament, if they raise a good point.
And politicians from all parties getting their fair share of horrific abuse at times. Have you experienced any of that? No,
I've been very lucky, really, because I'm not in. The real abuse has been in London. Mind you, there's some of the Brexit MEPs who went and took part in the Green, did suffer some, and that was deeply regrettable. But we've got to go forward on this. And as I say, my real fear is by not having another referendum, there'll be a deep-seated resentment, because people will feel, well, the general election that we might have dealt with other matters, we haven't really dealt with the Brexit issue. But that's the way it goes, I'm afraid. And you said if there was to be a second referendum with Boris Johnson's deal on the table, you'd back Remain. But how do you believe the country would vote? I'm not too sure, quite honestly. that is a very interesting one. If it's explained, the full drawbacks are explained, I think most of them will probably end up voting Remain, because we're never going to be allowed the clean break, the free break that I think would be better for economically for our country. I think there are too many vested strength forces in the London elite, the political elite, that are not going to let you do it. And at the end of the day, the people who are negotiating these deals on behalf are not the politicians, it's the civil servants. And we're now seeing they're so very much pro-Remain, you haven't got much of a hope.
There's no doubt,
in reality.
There's no doubt scaremongering both sides, the Leave and Remain sides, prior to that historic vote in 2016. But do you believe people truly knew what they were voting for?
Well, I do believe that they knew what they wanted. They either leave or Remain. And leave meant coming out of the EU, a customs union, coming out free from the European court, and having back your fishing waters. In that sense, I think it's pretty obvious. But we didn't have a hope. I mean, I did believe Theresa May initially when she said a no deal is better than a bad deal. But clearly that was not the case. We were completely, absolutely misled by the lady and her officials. And, you know, life is not perfect. And so you just have to deal with the cards you got. You're not going to get a clean break with the current government and the current civil servants. It probably might be going more to the American system. When the new administration comes in, the top civil servants are brought in. There's a change of civil servants. I think that's the way, probably forward.
And amid all the political chaos and turmoil, I mean, what do you do to get away from political life?
Well, I'm quite lucky, you know. I've got a family, I've got dogs and a few chickens, you know, and play my bit of sport. And it keeps your feet on the ground. And the dogs are not interested in politics, and neither are the chickens.
No, that's great. That's all we've got time for today, but it's been great to have you back on the show. Thank you for your time, and thank you everyone at home for watching. Make sure to tune in next time for the Politics Show. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.